All right, we are now up for episode 2 of our CompTIA Security Plus certification study series, our episodes, or what we're getting into. This is a long time coming. I'm excited about actually getting this recorded and getting it out there. So this is a cool that I'm actually executing on my plan that I've been planning on doing for the last 9 months. Before we get too involved though, I do want to do a little shout out. This is a shout out to Fictitious Tech, who had an amazing comment for me. I really appreciate all of your comments. This is just one of the most recent ones. These videos are precious. Initially, I started watching only selected videos from this list just because I wanted to cover the fundamental course in my software engineering program. But the practical approach along with theory has now attracted me to totally towards networks, and now I want to watch all. So thank you very much for those kind words. I do really appreciate when you all comment and like my videos. That helps get the word out. That's how I'm going to be making a living in the future. And so I do need that kind of support in order for me to continue to make these. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. In today's episode, we're going to be covering CompTIA Security Plus Objective 1.2. Given a scenario, demonstrate the impact of change management process on security. I'm not a big fan of how that is worded, but essentially what we're just doing is we're talking about the change management process and how we go about doing the change management process. I would actually, if it were me, I would not put this in the first domain. It's very important. It's very critical that we do this. I just don't know that it's a core concept of security that we base everything else off of, but it certainly is important. So what we're essentially going to be doing is talking about this 1.2. What we'll be covering is the business processes impacting security operations. So essentially, it's that change management process. What does it look like? So we're going to talk about things like change advisory board, ownership, stakeholders, impact analysis, test results, backout plans, fail forward, maintenance windows, and standard operating procedures. We're also going to get into some technical implications where we're going to talk about some things you have to consider during that change management process. We'll also get into documentation and what documentation looks like. We'll wrap things up talking about version control. All right, before we jump in, let's just talk about some of the impact that a security issue would have on the business. It could have loss of revenue, loss of assets, judgments, fines, notifications and mitigations, loss of competitive advantage. Even more importantly, it could be a loss of reputation, loss of customers, and even up to loss of businesses. In fact, actually, it's something like 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months after a cyber attack. So it's something crazy that we have to deal with. Like, it will put businesses under, and usually does put businesses under, at least small businesses. So this is a critical thing that businesses need to do. And so the change management process helps eliminate some of the security risk. Because let's face it, a lot of the security risk are changes that we make. Changes that will expose something, changes that will be the cause in itself. And I don't know how many times I've implemented a change and brought a system down. It's kind of embarrassing, actually, when those things happen. It's just part of what we do, has a certain amount of risk to it. And one way we can reduce that amount of risk is not have it all on us, that we rely on a change advisory board or a CAB. So let's get into a change advisory board. So this is one of the steps that if I go out there and make a change and do it wrong and the whole system comes down, that's on my shoulders, right? But if I go and have a plan and I bring it to the change advisory board, now they start looking through the plan and say, oh, did you think about this? Oh, how about this? Oh, I see that you have this configuration wrong. That's going to cause a problem. And so by having a change advisory board, we can better plan for these changes and have either less of an impact if there is an issue, or do away with just the chances that this is going to be an issue to begin with. So a change advisory board is somewhere where I would take my plan to and get approved before I carried through with the plan. See, there's this whole approval process. This whole approval process that there is a change request come in. So let's give an example. Let's say I'm part of an IT help desk system. I get a ticket, which essentially is asking for a change. And now what I have to do is I have to come up with a plan to implement that change. Now, what I'll do is once I've got that plan, I'll submit it to the change advisory board. They will evaluate it and say yay or nay. And if they say yay, yes, you can proceed forward, I move into the implementation, the monitoring, and then I close things out, during which this whole time I'm doing communication and documentation. So it's a whole process that I'm going to implement to make sure I do things right. As part of this process, we are usually identifying stakeholders. Well, what does that mean? So I'm going to have, when I implement a change, there's going to be people within the company, outside the company, with partners, with vendors. There's going to be a bunch of interested people in whatever change that I'm making. Sometimes that's going to be a few people, sometimes it's going to be a ton of people, sometimes it's going to be certain departments. It's just going to depend. So let me give an example. Let's say I'm making a change to the software that our customers are using. And that could tend to produce some calls, to stimulate some calls, get some of our customers to call in to our customer support team. And so if I'm going to implement this change, I probably should let the customer support team know that my change could affect them. So what I'll do is I'll add them to the stakeholders list so they understand and get communicated to of what changes are happening. So what are stakeholders? Stakeholders are just anybody that might have a vested interest in what I'm doing. And in this case, it's change control. So they might have some sort of vested interest in the change that I'm implementing. Now, before I move forward with this, before I actually implement a plan, I probably want to think about all the repercussions that that plan will have to make sure I'm not going to hurt or damage our reputation or any kind of anything that will happen there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform an impact analysis. An impact analysis is just a way to look at, okay, what are we doing and what kind of impact is it going to have? What is it going to have on our stakeholders and our users and other people within the company? What impact it will have? And as I go through that process, we call that an impact analysis. We're analyzing the impact of that. All right, then we want to take a look at test results. So what are test results? Well, during this process, as we are implementing and changing things, we're trying to make a change. So there is going to be something that's measurable, that's measurably different at the end of it. Well, what is that going to be? Well, we're going to monitor after we implement. We're going to monitor to see if we've successfully implemented that change, if it has the desired results, and is there any other results that have come from it, whether positive or negative. So we are going to be testing things after the fact, after we've implemented this change, to make sure that it's implemented correctly and it has the desired results. If it doesn't have the desired results, we probably want some sort of backout plan. This is an idea of where we can roll things back and do things in case the change that we made was not successful. So in this implementation phase, let's say it goes wrong and during the monitoring we discover this is not what we wanted. Well, then we are going to roll back to a state that it was before implementation. So that's the backout plan. The backout plan is rolling back to a state that's before we've implemented. This is different than fail forward. So another thing we could do, rather than failing back or implementing that backout plan, we can fail forward. So what is fail forward? Well, as we're monitoring the systems and we determine it's not right, it's not operating right, we're not in a good spot, we don't really have a great backout plan. What we want to do is we want to fail forward. Well, what does that mean? Well, that just means that now what we're going to do is we're going to fix whatever damage we caused by implementing yet another change. So essentially, we're going to go back to the beginning with another change that's going to fix the issue that we just rolled out. And now at the end of this change, hopefully not only have we fixed the problem that we caused, but the system is just overall running better than before we implemented either of those changes. So fail forward means that we're going to press forward and we're going to make the system just better because we know we needed to implement it anyways. So we fail forward. Now, as we're making changes, we usually have some sort of maintenance window. It's a time that we can make the changes that has the least amount of impact to our users, and maybe the users already know that there are certain times that we do this. So what is a good example of this? I worked for a SaaS company that had millions of students on there that were from all, usually K through 8, but some high schoolers. And in this system, we would have maintenance windows. Well, we knew students were on during the day, and because of the time zone, it would be anywhere from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. So we knew that they were on during that time, so that we didn't do any maintenance during that time. And we would wait until the evening time or the weekend to do our maintenance. Those were our maintenance windows, times that we did two things. Number one is we did it during those times to when the least amount of users were on our system, but also we told our customers that's when we do maintenance. So if it goes down during that time, then it's expected because we're doing maintenance on our system. So this is all becomes part of our standard operating procedure, or SOP. So what is an SOP? Well, it's procedures. So it's the way we go about doing business. And it's our standard operating, which means it's the thing that we do usually. So in an ideal situation, we have documents of all of our procedures, and then we follow those procedures to be able to execute whatever we're supposed to do. It's some sort of process that we do, some sort of flow that we make things happen. So in the morning, I have a standard operating procedure. I get up out of bed, I go and take a shower, there's clothes that I put on, I have breakfast. I go through a operation procedure in order to carry something out. We do that within our businesses as well. So standard operating procedures, we want to define them so that way we can really refine our processes and they get better and better. All right. Time for a comment. Once again, it does help me if you do make comments. Today was kind of a fun one here, is what's a standard operating procedure that you have in your life? And is there a standard operating procedure that has served you well, and maybe one that hasn't served you as well, maybe one that you need to do away with? So is there a way that you go about doing business, or a way that you go about doing something that has both served you well and one that maybe that hasn't served you that well? Put that down in the comments below. I'm excited about reading those because it's not necessarily technology related. It can be, or it could be related to your business or your company that you work for. But I would like to see some of the ones about your personal life, about how you go about doing things in your personal life that is either really rewarding or maybe things that might detract from your personal life. And when you're down there, if you could like this video, and if you're interested in future episodes, make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell. All right, so we went over the business process impacting security operations. We're gonna get into technical implications. Now, I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not actually a big fan of this list. So with technical implementation, we of course go through implementing this, but as we are planning, we need to think about the repercussions of what is going to happen during this phase. And the reason why I'm not a big fan of this is certainly not an exhaustive list. This is just kind of a snapshot of some of the things that you might want to think about when you're implementing a change. So Security Plus has these ones written down, but I think you could just as easily come up with, I mean, maybe even hundreds more. I mean, this is just the small little bite-sized pieces of the things to think about. So technical implications. One thing that we might go and do is try to install software on a machine just to realize we can't do it because there's an allow list. An allow list says that these are the softwares you can have, anything else you can't have. And so now we go to install and suddenly we run into a roadblock because there's an allow list on it. Or maybe there's a deny list and it's denying the program that we're trying to install on it. So that's one thing that we need to consider. There's also restricted activities that happen on a machine. There's some things that we can do and some things we can't do. Maybe we don't have a privileged account. That's like an administrative account that we do certain things on that machine. So we just need to think through, is there restrictive activities that would prevent us from making certain changes? We also have to think about downtime. We've talked about downtime, and that can cause a lot of problems. And well, why would you get a downtime? Well, one of them might be because we're restarting a service. Let's say we're updating a service and it's going to require a restart on that. And maybe even it's not going to affect the user directly, but maybe there's a dependency. There's another service that relies on the service we're restarting. So now we restart that service thinking, oh, well, that service isn't that critical, but then we find out there's this other service that relies on it, and suddenly now it causes downtime for our end user. So that can be problematic. We've got here application restart. Here, another one I'm not a big fan of, because essentially applications and services are the same thing. They're both programs that are running on the machine. An application is just something that we launch and we're running into it. But what I could do is just as easily turn that application into a service, and it runs in the background. So that's the difference between the two. Is it running in the background, or is it just running on the machine? Then we also have legacy applications, which can cause problems as well. Because if, let's say, we update something that's really critical, but we didn't realize that there's this legacy application that has a dependency on that can be problematic as well. This is all to say, these are just a few examples. This is all to say we just need to think about all the technical implications of making some sort of change on the system, and how these things are all interrelated, and it could have this trickle-down effect and really affect our end users when we weren't intending it to do. So we got to think through all that process. During this whole time, I said that we have to have good communication and documentation. What does that look like? Well, a lot of times these change requests come in through a ticketing system. We get the change request, and then what we have to do is we have to type up a document for that. So the ticket is documentation. The plan that we create is documentation. We turn it into the advisory board, and that advisory board either approves it, and then that needs to be documented of who approved it. And then we go through the implementation, and we find out new things during the implementation, so we got to update our documents off of that. We wouldn't want to go down the line and then realize we want to do the same thing, make a similar type of change. We copy the documentation and suddenly realize we made the same mistake twice because we didn't update our documentation and realized that we needed to improve our process or something. We monitor this. We need maybe some sort of proof that we've made the change, and then we go do the change closure. Well, what are we closing out? Well, we're closing out the ticket here. We're closing out our plan when we're updating the rest of our documents. So we just got to think through this process of all of this documentation and communication that happens along the way. Some of the documentation might be updating diagrams. I often find that diagrams go unupdated, and then we go and reference them later, and then that can be a problem. Or updating our policies and procedures. All right, and we've got version control. So version control is a great way in order to implement changes and have some sort of change control process. So a great example of this would be software. Software usually has version control to it. Well, we are starting to implement some of those same things in IT as well. So what does that mean? Well, essentially, every time we make a change, we create a new version of it. So this is the current version right here. What are some of the advantages of this? Well, we can see details of the changes. I mean, we can actually go back and say, okay, what's the difference between version 4 and version 5? It also has accountability, because usually version control is done by a person, and there's some sort of record of that. So we can hold somebody accountable when they make the wrong changes. We also have a historical record. You can go back and see all the changes that have happened over time. We also have a backup plan. If we implement this code right here and realize, oh, something's wrong, we just revert back to a prior version. So there's so many advantages to this version control. So a lot of times we like to practice version control as part of our change control process. All right, we are starting to wrap this up. I do want to say the way I'm going through these is I'm just sequentially going through all of the objectives. This is a very efficient way to cover the information, and it's great that it follows the certification. There are problems with this though. It doesn't necessarily follow what the real world actually is going to exhibit out there. And there's a problem with the efficiency and understanding because we're just going and covering things, or essentially it's a bunch of definitions. We're not covering things in a way that you end up memorizing more rather than creating more understanding. So hopefully you're getting a lot out of this. This is a great way to operate, but this is the way that most certification programs, courses that you take out there are sequential, and this is the way that you do that. But I have a whole curriculum that's set up for more global. So if you are getting close and you're really knowledgeable already, this is a great way to push you across the line to go and take that certification test. But if you're looking for a deeper understanding, or if you're starting at the beginning, or if you just want to push your skills to the next level, it's going to take a little more than just watching a video full of definitions. That's where I have a Security Plus bundle out there. The Security Plus bundle has 4 courses that are more of a global approach to really nail down what you're going to experience out there in the real world and get really familiar with this information. And once we have that down and really understand the information, only then do we move to the sequential learning phase, phase 2. So really what we're doing when we're going through this is a small part of my exam prep, and there is so much more to the whole bundle. So I would recommend checking it out. I'm going to put a link down below in the description. Check it out. I hope you find some value, not only in this, but maybe you find a lot of value in that bundle and taking that global approach to learning so there's a lot less memorization. All right, we're wrapping this up. CompTIA Security Plus Objective 1.2. Given a scenario, demonstrate the impact of change management process on security. I appreciate you listening through this. If you could give a thumbs up on that video, that is very helpful for me. And then, like I say, I'm interested to hear people's standard operating procedures in your personal life. What has served you well? What is an SOP that has served you well? And what maybe is a procedure that has not served you so well in the past? Maybe a way that you go about doing business that you'd like to change a little bit. Put that down in the comments. I look forward to reading them, and we will catch you on the next episode.